Motion to open the meeting?
Do I have a second?
Second,
All in favor, Mr. DeRoss,
yes.
Ms. Valley,
Yes.
and Mr. Hessian's, yes, that is unanimous. As you know, the town, before we go on, just in case anyone on that hasn't heard or read it, Rockland has experienced a sewer system overflow. Just in the month of December, right now, just in the month of January, we've had close to 5 inches of rain. Now, the facility was designed to handle 2.5 million gallons a day. That's what we're permitted for. However, in events like this, we have handled and treated successfully 6 million gallons a day. But the holding tanks have a capacity of a little over 6 million. Those holding tanks are treated wastewater. When it gets to a point such as today, that wastewater is pumped out directly to our receiving water body, which is French's Stream. Now, that is not raw sewage. There's no solids. It's treated water with additional chlorine added. So there is no risk to humans. Well, no one would be drinking out of French's Stream anyway, but that flow, that watershed goes directly to Forge Pond in Hanover. So there is no risk to a homeowner of it backing up into a home or to a sewer system, to a commercial property. I think that probably by now the high water has peaked and it should start to diminish, and we can stop that probably sometime tomorrow. With that said, as I said, we have Wright Pierce with us tonight, Kevin Olson, and Adam Higgins representing them. They will be presenting the Phase 2 Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan. This plan is part of our overall assessment of the sewer system here in Rockland. Originally, it was going to be done in 2006, and unfortunately, I guess money was allocated elsewhere. But anyway, we're back on track, and this is just a key phase to our rate study that's being conducted and the facility upgrade, which will be taking place shortly. So with that, I'd like to turn the table over to, I guess, Adam or Kevin.
Yeah, I'll start, and then Adam.
Kevin Olson.
Yeah, hi, Kevin Olson. Adam, you want to pull up the presentation and share? Or perfect. Thank you. So good evening, everybody. Yeah, as Chuck said, the plan for tonight is to give you guys an update on the CWMP, or the Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan. We look forward to giving you guys that update. We have completed Phase 1. We've actually completed Phase 2, and we're working on Phase 3. So the second slide here, really just gives you a quick feel for what we're going to talk to you guys about. Why do the CWMP? And Chuck, you did note Phase 2. Yes, we'll talk about that, but we'll also quickly touch on Phase 1 and then Phase 2, and then we'll give you an overview of Phase 3, which again is ongoing right now. We'll leave some time for question and discussion at the end. We have about 30 slides, so we probably can buzz through those at a decent pace here. So next slide, Adam. So I'm Kevin Olson, Ms. Chuck already mentioned, project manager Wright Pierce, and Adam Higgins. I think you know Adam already as well. He is the lead project engineer. You see our contact information there. And so let's get into it. Why do that CWMP? Well, there's a lot of reasons. First and foremost, it really lays out a roadmap for your, what is your wastewater plan for the next 20 or perhaps 30 years. And it really pulls together, there's 3 major components to your wastewater infrastructure system. There's your treatment plant. You can see it right there in this nice aerial. You have the collection system and all the pipes, and then you also have a number of pump stations. So it will pull together all of that work into one comprehensive plan. Wright Pierce did complete in 2021, it was April 2021, a comprehensive assessment of the wastewater treatment plant, so that's already done. We're going to update that and pull that into the CWMP. We also are going to pull in, we visited all the pump stations. The sewer commission is working on some upgrades right now, but we're going to pull that information in and make recommendations for improvements there. And then also draw on a lot of work that's been ongoing in the collection system. Kind of to segue a little bit from what Chuck was just saying, you know, certainly at times there are some flow challenges, and infiltration inflow is a little bit of a challenge. So we'll be able to draw from others' work into what the sewer rehab plan should look like. Couple other things, you know, the CWMP will help, you know, keep you on track for compliance with your regulatory requirements via your new NIPDES permit, National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, NIPDES permit. You have a pretty strict seasonal total phosphorus limit. You also have an EPA order that you got in the summer, and we had to roll some of that information into our comprehensive wastewater management plan. So that will all be included in the CWMP. Rockland is largely sewered, as you guys know, but there are some areas that still rely on individual on-site septic systems. So as part of any CWMP, DEP requires to look at those unsewered areas and see if maybe off-site solutions are warranted in any of those areas or not. So that was a major focus in phase one. Adam will talk a little bit about that. Last bullet here, my last comment, completing a CWMP does potentially position the town of Rockland for 0% state revolving fund loans for the nutrient related portion of any treatment plant upgrades. So I just mentioned phosphorus, that certainly is the nutrient of focus. So there's a potential financial upside to completing the CWMP. With that, we'll hand it over to Adam.
All right, thanks, Kevin. As Kevin mentioned, I'm Adam Higgins. I'm the project engineer for the CWMP for Rockland. We finished phase one back around the same time the EPA order was being finalized, so back in late summer of 2022. We'll touch quickly on what went into that and how it relates to moving into phase 2 and 3. We recently completed phase 2 about a few weeks ago now, and we're currently working on phase 3. So the CWMP Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan, we do typically break these up into the three phases, where the first one is all about looking at the existing conditions for your wastewater system, the town as a whole, like population trends, metrics, town planning, zoning, etc. Existing conditions of your pipes in the ground for the sewer system, water demand in town, pump station, existing conditions, and the wastewater treatment plant. Let's jump into that a little further. So as Kevin mentioned, a couple of years ago, the wastewater treatment plant was evaluated by Wright Pierce. We took a look at the existing conditions and identified, what needs to be upgraded on an age-related basis, but we also took a look at what can be improved in terms of the process and how to continue maintaining meeting permit or get within permit compliance. And part of that assessment was reviewing secondary and tertiary treatment options, which would address the total phosphorus limits. The town and the sewer commission has done a lot of work with infiltration and inflow. Infiltration is basically when groundwater comes up higher and there's holes or cracks or loose joints in your piping or manholes, that water gets in and that clean water gets to your wastewater treatment plant eventually. And inflow, which is like if you have a hole in a manhole cover or a sump pump that's connected to your sewer system in a private residence, that clean water also gets pumped or gets into the sanitary sewer system as well. So we don't want to treat that clean water. We'd love for it to be treated through stormwater means. So the town's done a lot in terms of infiltration and inflow identification, knowing where the sources of those are, and are currently working on removing some of those sources of clean water and reducing flows to the plant. And then we also take a look at Rockland as a whole. So the town actually recently completed quite a bit of planning documents, the master plan, open space plan, and we did leverage those quite a bit for phase one. So again, phase one is all about establishing those existing conditions and identifying the potential problems in town, which will then move forward into phase 2 and 3. So we take a look at the entire town, collection system, treatment, water, and perform a wastewater needs assessment. Jump into that. So as Kevin mentioned, Rockland is like 90 or 95% sewered, meaning most properties in town are served by the town sewer system. The remaining ones are serviced by a typical on-site subsurface wastewater disposal system, aka a septic system. And basically what phase one aims to do is take a look at those unsewered areas and see if septic systems really are the best option for the next 20 years in terms of providing adequate wastewater treatment. So can someone confirm if you can see my cursor on the
Yes,
figure?
okay.
Okay, great. That will help. All right, so you can see here in the orange, this is the existing parcels that are connected to the town sewer already. And then the areas in green are either conservation lands or areas that we removed due to there may be a development already planned or open space like Union Point, the golf courses in town, Beach Hill landfill. Those properties already have plans or they're protected, and we don't need to look at sewer solutions for those areas. So what we were left with is what you can see in the pink, which are really just a bunch of scattered parcels throughout the town. And what we normally like to do is group those parcels together based on topography, excuse me, topography, major roads, potential like landmarks or some identifier that helps us reduce the area and size and provide a smaller window to evaluate. Due to the kind of spread out nature, as you can see up here, we had 5 parcels that we called study area 1. And up here, we only had 2 parcels that we called study area 2. So it's a bit unique for Rockland compared to some of our normal CWMPs. But we did take a look at each of those study areas and basically evaluated and scored them on a few different parameters relating to how adequately they can treat wastewater on site. So what goes into that? We have a primary criteria, which is more weighted on a 0 to
Excuse
10.
me, Adam, could
Yep.
you bounce back to that last slide for a moment?
Absolutely.
Would you, so to just to give people an idea how they're looking at it in case they can't see it clearly. So they know what's north and south. Could you just touch in on where the air base is?
Yep.
Where Adam's looking, that is the air base. Now the reservoir. That is the reservoir area. And down around Beach Hill, which is down in the very southernmost, just so everyone's acclimated to what you're looking at. All right, I'm sorry, Adam.
No problem. So we did end up with the 7 study areas. And again, so we graded these based on primary criteria and secondary criteria. Primary were carried out a larger weight, so a 0 to 10 scale, and the secondary criteria were a 0 to 5 scale. the primary criteria consisted of higher impact items in relation to wastewater disposal on site. So soil drainage class, very important, depth to water table, bedrock, parcel size, whether or not a parcel had a private well or not. And then the secondary criteria consisted of, is that parcel or area within a drinking water protection district, within an area that has a regulated setback, flood in the floodplain, within habitat areas or historic districts. And we went through and we graded each of these 7 areas on this scale, added them up, and based on those that scored high, identified the high needs areas that would move forward. So essentially, Weymouth and Pond Street, Weymouth Street and Pond Street, which are these 2 northern areas up here, scored the highest and became high needs areas that we carried forward. Oh, this title got changed.
Adam, can I ask a question, please?
Yes.
Go back to that other map. I'm just curious because the Beach Street area down there in the south, that is a large pink area. But that wasn't listed on the score sheet at all.
That's like,
This one here is area
Yeah.
7,
Yep.
which is down here.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yep. All right. So after we've determined these high needs areas that we're gonna carry forward into phase 2 and phase 3, we also established the existing conditions for your collection system, pump stations, and wastewater treatment plant. So Rockland does consist of 57 miles of gravity sewer and 4 miles of force main. There's 13 pump stations and serves approximately 18,000 customers, primarily from Rockland, but there are small parts of Abington that are connected. And then the wastewater treatment plant does have a NIPDES permit, which has a flow limit of 2.5 MGD on average, and the new issuance last November 2021 instituted a total phosphorus limit of 0.1 milligrams per liter in the growing season, which is from April to October. And this figure here on the right is a map of the existing system. So the gravity sewers in green, the force main, which is the pipe that is pumped flow from the pump stations, shown in red. The pump stations are these yellow boxes that you can see, and the wastewater treatment plant is down here, the green rectangle. As we mentioned before, the wastewater treatment plant was evaluated a couple of years ago, and we did leverage that report to establish the existing conditions. We updated it based on items that had changed since the report was finalized, and items that the Veolia and the town have either updated or replaced, and also based on the data collected over the last 2 years. We updated what we call flows and loads, which I will get into. But kind of the main point I wanted to highlight here, because this is the largest looming, upgrade project that the town, the sewer commission is going to face, that is basically going to be derived out of the CWMP, is the wastewater treatment plant upgrade. So, what is really driving this large upgrade? As you can see in these pictures, these are the aeration tanks where the biological treatment occurs, basically. These are like big reactor vessels. And you can see just in the concrete and the handrails, the condition is, they're pretty old, it's pretty worn. The motors are fairly old. And these specific types of equipment are called mechanical surface aerators. They're not the most flexible, but they were pretty popular back in the 70s and 80s. So we really wouldn't put these back in if we were upgrading a plant today. So just the type of equipment used at the plant is something that we would want to take a look at in any upgrade.
Adam, before you go, and just for background information to any of the residents on, the sewer plant went online, I believe, in 1962. That's when it was originally designed. It has had no major upgrades since that point. So, right. Kevin, I would say 90% of that equipment is 1962.
Yeah, I would agree.
And so that's what
all of that concrete.
And we did have structural engineers look at the concrete basin. So I'm sorry, Adam, keep going.
Nope.
I could add just real quick too, Adam, that I was on site at the treatment plant last Friday and walking around with the operator, and on those aeration tanks, there's a number of gates, that connect. There's 8 aeration tanks, and there's a number of things that happen. And, the stem, Adam, if you want to point to one, I know you can't zoom in on it, but there's actual stems that go from those operators. Yeah, if you go down right there, some of those, that stem is still intact, but there's some stems that actually are completely rusted apart. And, so you cannot operate certain gates there. So just another real life example of some of the age that is really going on. So I just thought
one other thing to mention on those gates and valves is that there were times you could physically, the valves themselves are corroded shut. You can't open them, and you can physically see the concrete lifting up and down like it was breathing.
Yep.
So these are pictures of the anaerobic digesters, which are, basically a gas pressure vessel. And you can see the corrosion and wear and tear that's evident on these structures, which is really just, kind of how the entire plant is due to its age. And this equipment here, we use to separate or press the sludge solids and separate some of the water from it to dispose of the sludge solids at like a landfill, for example. This type of equipment, again, was very popular 20, 30, 40 years ago. There are better options out there now. This is a picture of the electrical generators for standby power. As we've heard, it's basically on its last legs, and Chuck has done a lot of work to try and get this replaced in the near term ahead of the upgrade based on that.
One more thing while Adam is on that, and due to the age of the equipment, and I think Ray Pierce will verify this, one of the biggest obstacles we have is when there is a part needed or something fails, we can't find those parts because it's no longer manufactured.
Yep.
Good point, Chuck. Good point.
It's not uncommon to look on eBay, as funny as that sounds, for some of these parts.
That's what we've been doing.
Yep. So as I mentioned, the new NIPDES permit that was issued contained a new total phosphorus limit. So you can see here an average monthly limit between April 1st and October 31st, which is considered the grow season. The limit is 0.1 milligrams per liter. And then in the non-growing season over the winter, the limit jumps up to 1 milligram per liter. But this value here, the 0.1, this is very strict, and to meet it reliably does require basically an equipment upgrade, a new process to be added, the tertiary treatment, to be able to meet that. I mentioned that we reviewed the data over the last 2 years, which included the pandemic, which had an impact on everybody's treatment plants, and Rockland was no different. We wanted to just verify, basically what we were seeing still made sense from the evaluation till now, and how the pandemic really affected things. So you can see this dark blue line here, this is the permitted flow limit of 2.5 MGD. The blue line here is the monthly average flow at the facility from June 2020 to January 2022 when we started phase 1. You can see, during the pandemic, during the shutdown, flow has dropped way down. And then as stuff started to open back up, flow jumps quite a bit as commercial properties and stuff like that reopened in Rockland. And of course, you can see more often than not, the flow is above the permitted limit of 2.5 MGD, which is a large driver for this CWMP and the additional items added by the EPA. So as we were wrapping up phase 1 in the summer, the EPA did issue an order in draft form in July, and then it was finalized in late August to early September. And part of the driver for that order is flows have been historically high at the wastewater treatment plant. They've been above permit. EPA really wants the town, the sewer commission, the plant to review infiltration and inflow reduction, peak flow reduction, basically ways to manage and reduce the flow coming to the wastewater treatment plant to get within permit. The order added scope into the CWMP, which we've incorporated into both phase 2 and phase 3. And part of that is to evaluate flow shedding. So basically, can we take flow from your existing collection system and instead of sending it to the wastewater treatment plant, send it somewhere else potentially, or take a portion of the treated flow at the wastewater treatment plant and send it somewhere else rather than the French stream. That way we can reduce that flow back below the permitted limits. And the EPA also wanted us to take a look at an alternative surface water discharge. So right now the treatment plant discharges to the French stream, which is an impaired water. And we took a look, and really the only option that's nearby for Rockland would be to construct infrastructure, pipeline, pump stations to then get it to the Indian Head River in, I think Hanover is where we were looking at as an option. So not very close. I guess any questions on phase 1 before I jump into phase 2? Okay. So
if I could just throw in just as a reminder, when Adam said our permit limit is 2.5, we hit 7 today, 7 million gallons.
Yeah, the chart Adam showed we'd have to add several gradations going vertical on that, wouldn't we, just to show that?
And I'm sure the average for January is going to be quite high based on the amount of rain we got.
Yeah.
All right, so phase 2. So traditionally, phase 2 really only looks at those high needs areas that we developed in phase 1. So the 2 areas in the north on Weymouth Street and Pond Street. And we basically shortlist some options that may be better than septic systems. And we do a deeper dive and cut some of those options away. And the ones that are remaining, we move forward into phase 3. We also, based on the EPA order, added an evaluation of groundwater discharge potential locations, which we'll talk about further along to potentially do some of that flow shedding that I talked about. All right, so we have our high needs areas, handful of parcels in the northeast part of town. They have septic systems. What are the other options other than these septic systems that we can take a look at to see if they make sense moving forward into the future? So there's different types of on-site systems. There's the septic system, and then there's items called innovative alternative treatment options, which really just add further levels of treatment other than what a septic system provides. There is a decentralized wastewater treatment plant option, and then collection system extension. So high needs area 1, Weymouth Street, shown here on the right. We have the parcels outlined in red. This green area is actually wetlands that are shown. It's in the northern part of town. The top 3 parcels that you see there are very wet, between surface water and wetlands. And it is near the existing collection system. You can see here in green. And it's near the Union Point development, which we'll get into a little further during the groundwater discussion on why that's important. Area 2, we have 2 parcels just to the right of where area 1 was, just above the reservoir. And as you can see, again, a lot of wetlands in this area, and also pretty close to the existing sewer.
If I may again interrupt Adam, I'm sorry, that area 2, Adam, could you highlight that? Where Adam is pointed to, that is the proposed shingle mill area.
Right.
Yeah, and it looks like the title of the slide, Adam, might be incorrect.
Yeah, I saw that.
So that's okay, though. It is area 2, just so you guys know.
And you are within a drinking water protection zone 2 in this area. So moving quickly along, we took a look and did a similar grading system to what we did in phase 1, where we had our grades based on different options like level of treatment. Does the treatment option address nutrient removal? How much would it cost? Is it hard to operate? Is it potentially hard to do legally or permitting? And we take all those grading values, add them up, and again, shortlist what we think should continue on into phase 3. So for these 2 areas, we did end up carrying forward, staying with individual septic systems, the IA systems, a small wastewater treatment facility option for needs area 1, and potentially extending the existing collection system to this area. And then for needs area 2, same items, but we did not include a small wastewater treatment facility, as the land area and proximity to like Union Point was a bit too far away. So we thought the cost would be too prohibitive. And essentially what we'll do in phase 3 is take a look at each of these options further, provide cost estimates for, over 20 years, how much would it cost to replace septic systems versus construct a new wastewater treatment plant and collection system, or extend the existing collection system, and compare those and come up with a final recommended plan. We also estimated the flow from each of these areas. How we did that was the potential existing flow column here is basically the parcels that have a building already constructed right now. We estimated flow based on the zoning it's in. And I think both of these are in hotel zoning areas. So you'll see the flow is quite high, and that's the reason. But essentially we take a look at the parcel size, determine about how large of a house or commercial development or hotel can fit on it, and estimate the flow based on that. And then the estimated build out flow column here is basically if the parcel is vacant, we again look at the zoning, the size of the parcel, say, a hotel of this size, this many rooms can fit on it, and using 100 gallons per day per hotel room, essentially. This is how much flow you could potentially expect if it was built out. And then this column here, estimated flow from II, basically the pipes that get put in the ground to collect the flow from these parcels and bring them to a collection system. We have to assume there's some level of water that gets into these pipes and account for that. And that's really just based on the pipe size and the length. And then we have our total flows for each area. So again, you'll see these are quite large. There's large vacant parcels. I'll jump back. So like, as Chuck mentioned, the shingle mill development, this parcel here is slated for that, or reviewing it. But we took a look and said, yes, it's zoned for a hotel, and based on the size, a hotel could fit here, parking lot, and came up with a flow that, made sense. So again, these are quite large.
Yeah, so Adam, if I could, the obvious takeaway on that previous slide is, given your current flow situation right now, it just, if that happens, there's hopefully, flow shedding or reduction in II will make room and allow the sewer moratorium to be lifted and allow some of these things to happen. But you can't just obviously pile those flows onto the current situation. So,
right.
Sorry, Adam, just wanted to add that.
Nope, that was good.
Thank you.
All right. So the next part of phase 2 is really evaluating, based on the EPA order, where could groundwater discharge or wastewater disposal into the ground occur within Rockland. What that means, you have your existing plant down here, which discharges into a surface water body or the French stream. If, similar to your septic system, which just discharges out to your yard and then goes down to groundwater, that is an option for a wastewater treatment plant. And, you need significantly more land based on the amount of flow, but the EPA basically said, as an option, take a look at if this is possible to help reduce flows to your wastewater treatment plant, since you have had historical flow issues. So what we usually will do when we take a look at potential sites for groundwater discharge disposal, we like large vacant land, as these do take up quite a bit of space. We don't want them to be wet. So wetlands, surface water bodies, usually like to avoid those. It's more difficult to treat the wastewater to a level inside a drinking water protection zone. So we like to avoid those, but if we can't, we just understand that it's going to be a bit more expensive to treat that wastewater. We want to avoid high groundwater areas, areas with regulated setbacks, etc. So we took a look at Rockland. We said, Union Point, this is a really good spot. There's a lot of open space up here. Currently, there's no development. We do understand there's some development planned. We took a look at each golf course, so the Rockland Golf Course and the Harmon Golf Club. We took a look at the school land over here.
That's the Eston School for people listening.
Yep, sorry. And then we did look at the wastewater treatment plant parcel itself, and then some of the land down here, which consists of the Beach Street Conservation Area, some land owned by the town of Whitman, and then the McCarthy Farm open space, which was recently purchased by the town. And based on what we're seeing for soil conditions, wetlands, surface water, that kind of stuff, we take a look at this whole parcel and we reduce down based on what we're seeing to a smaller area that we could actually put groundwater disposal in from a desktop level. We haven't actually done any field work to see if these locations make sense once you get through the top layer, but from our computer desktops, we can identify areas that may make sense and warrant further study. So you can see the orange hatching is those reduced areas that we identified. So for the Rockland golf course, the whole thing wouldn't work because a lot of the area down here on the southern part of the parcel is very wet. So it's not great for groundwater disposal. Similarly, the wastewater treatment plant, that the whole parcel basically is wet. So it really wouldn't work well for groundwater disposal. So we took those reduced areas we showed in orange and identified the square footage. We took a conservative approach and said, okay, we know this is desktop level. Let's assume only 50% of that area is actual usable space for groundwater disposal, and came up with this middle column for square footage. And then for wastewater disposal to the ground, normally Mass DEP has some established guidelines that say, based on what you've done for field work and your hydrogeological work, you can really range from, let's say, 1.5 gallons per day to 5 gallons per day of a loading rate. And we've shown here 2 and 5, but what does that mean? So basically 2 gallons of wastewater can be put into the ground for every square foot. So we take this square footage and these loading rates to say this is how much flow could potentially be disposed of in these areas. And if you look at the numbers, you can see quite a bit of flow could potentially be disposed of to ground in some of these areas, Union Point being a large one. And again, we do understand that Union Point has its own, developer and plan, and all of this may not be able to be used, but there are some significant options for flow shedding based on these parcels of land that we've seen. And then in phase 3, we're going to take a look at these and provide cost estimates for each of them. So how much flow can we actually potentially put in? What are the next steps for evaluating these sites and potentially permitting and designing a system? How large of a wastewater treatment plant can we put on there, and how much would that cost? And evaluate all the options.
Adam, I don't know if now is a good time to maybe just give a brief update of, earlier this week, we got a good working group together to really start to vet out the potential alternative sites, and we learned quite a bit. I don't know if you want to just touch on that quick.
Yeah. So
please do, Adam, on that, because that was quite productive.
It was.
Yeah. So Chuck was great and got a bunch of us together earlier this week on Tuesday. So the town administrator, Doug, representatives from each golf course, representative from the planning board and Union Point sat down with Chuck, myself, and Kevin, and we discussed each of these areas and do they make sense? Did we miss anything? Are there other potential options that we didn't evaluate? Like the Jefferson School, for example, was brought up. McCarthy's farm was, not necessarily eliminated, but talked about as a potential non-starter. The Beach Hill landfill was talked about in terms of adding it in as an option. And we discussed quite in depth the plan and development for Union Point and why this area that we're showing is may not necessarily be an option.
So really with the ultimate goal, that was great, Adam, but the ultimate goal is to take the list of however many we have, 6, 7, 8, vet them out, get the right people in the room, which we did. And then, yeah, that further informs us on, because if there's some that just aren't going to end up happening for whatever reasons, technical, political, environmental, hydrogeological, let's not waste much more time with them. Let's develop the ones that potentially could be real, and then we'll work those through phase 3.
Yep. Any questions on phase 2 before I jump to phase 3? Okay. So as we mentioned, we are, starting phase 3 this month. Have already done quite a bit of legwork. And really this takes a look at every piece that we evaluate in phase 1 and provides the recommendations, cost estimates, schedule for improvements for each of those parts and pieces. So we take a look at those unsewered needs areas, so 1 and 2. We provide the cost estimates for staying with on-site septic systems, potentially going with an innovative alternative system, the options for adding in a collection system and decentralized wastewater treatment plant, or connecting to the existing collection system. And based on those flows that we estimated for each of those, we trace that flow through the existing collection system and basically say, do the pipes, do the pump stations have enough capacity for this flow? If not, you're going to have to plan to upsize them if you want to add these areas in.
I could add one more thing. The people that are viewing this, these are the things, some of the things that are going to be supplied in estimating our rates for the future. So that's why this, along with the rate study, is so important to you, the taxpayer, to question these and understand why our rates are going to be doing what they are and why the necessity of that. But
all right, so next we look at the existing collection system and basically identify further studies and work that can be conducted to reduce II within the existing collection system. One of the EPA order items was to review flow equalization options. So this looked at both inline and offline storage. So basically, can we put a wide point in the existing pipes to hold more water during like a storm, for example, to reduce the peak flows at the wastewater treatment plant? Or can we build a tank at a pump station or at the wastewater treatment plant that can just hold water to get us through a high flow event and then pump it back in later? Again, capacity, and then what are the real options for groundwater discharge and potential flow shedding? And again, we'll give cost estimates for the groundwater disposal, shortlisted items, decentralized treatment plants, etc. As part of that. And then for the pump stations, we did a site visit in phase 1 where we went to every one of the 13 pump stations and basically identified this is the existing condition, this is how things can be improved, and here's our recommendations. So in phase 3, we'll put costs to those recommendations and also over the 20-year timeline give you like a capital improvement plan basically that says, you should address this in the near term, this in the midterm, this in the longer term. And one other item that we don't have on here but was an EPA order item is they do want us to look at, again, peak flow reduction options. So can we operate these pump stations differently to hold more flow in the pipes rather than pumping it all to the wastewater treatment plant? So that will be part of it as well. And then the big ticket item, the wastewater treatment plant. Again, we're going to leverage the evaluation that was already completed a couple years ago and update it based on improvements that have already been made and identify those age-related improvements that still need to be done, and also come up with a plan and recommendation for total phosphorus compliance. which will likely be a new tertiary treatment system, update the cost estimate for those, and then provide a schedule and implementation plan and provide funding and financing options. So this is a very large looming upgrade. You know, what is out there for funding and financing options for the town to look for grants or state aid or lower interest loans, for example.
And if I may, one more time, Adam, what I want people to recognize is the facility study was just that. It looked at the facility at the wastewater treatment plant. It did not take into consideration anything to do with the collection system or the pump stations. Your collection systems are your piping, et cetera, getting it to the facility. And the pump stations are what pumps it through those pipes. They were not in that original $50 million cost estimate, which due to inflation, vendors, and yada, yada, I think Kevin and I both agreed that that estimate is now in the vicinity of probably close to mid 70 million at today's dollar.
Yep. Unfortunately, but yes, things have gone up dramatically, as we know. And I would add one thing just to item 4, the treatment plant plan there. As Chuck just mentioned, that's one large upgrade project, but there has been and there's ongoing and there'll continue to be discussions, with the sewer commission, with Doug Lapp, town manager, board of selectmen, all of the powers to be, about whether it makes sense to maybe phase the treatment plant upgrades. For example, phase 1, there is a timeline in the NIPD's permit and the AO to get into total phosphorus compliance. So phasing might very well be the best path, and that would also help spread out the cost too. So just wanted to let people know that we're looking at that.
And then, in closing from our side of things, schedule for phase 3, the EPA order does have the requirement that the CWMP be finalized by the end of April of this year, 2023. So there will be a public hearing in mid-April to satisfy, the requirements from the Department of Environmental Protection to approve this CWMP when we're all done with it. There will be a public hearing in mid-April where, the public can come and ask questions, and we'll incorporate those questions and answers into the final document.
And that presentation will encompass all 3 phases, correct?
Yes. Yep. And, for the rules that DEP has set out, the final document needs to be posted to the public 30 days before the public hearing, and the public hearing needs to be advertised in a local paper 45 days before. So you'll be seeing items in mid-March.
And again, if I may, to those again in the audience, the phase 1 draft and final is on the sewer department website, and the phase 2 as well is posted by tomorrow, along with the slides you're seeing now.
Chuck, on that note, if you could give us just a little bit of time to adjust a couple of the slides, like, for example, that one slide that had the incorrect title on it. So, if you could let Adam and I.
Okay, I'll tell you what, I'll have that posted. You send me the clean slide and you tell me when it's go to post it. But I did post the original, our slides from Tuesday's meeting.
Okay.
Just so people know.
Sure. Yep.
And then we will just say that this is the upgrade, so they will know.
Yep. We'll get it. Adam and I are working together, and it's only a couple of adjustments on a few slides. So we'll go ahead and get that tweaked and get that to you. If it's not tomorrow, it could be over the weekend or Monday. But
that's fine.
Soon.
That is fine. As long as I get it up by next week, let's say.
Yep. That works.
That's it for you, gentlemen.
That's it.
Yes. Thank you.
What I want to do is thank you very much. This is really the first time in my career is working with Wright Pearson, Kevin and Adam, and I think They've done a top-notch, very thorough, meticulous job, and I thank them very much. Very professional, very well done. And I've got great hopes for the future with this upgrade. Again, ladies and gentlemen, as Kevin said, we're going to be trying to break the facility upgrade into pieces. But what you're looking at with the comprehensive wastewater management plan, remember, is a 20-year plan. This is not something that's going to be done tomorrow. It's something that gives us that the town has never had an opportunity to plan and look at realistically what we're doing. And everyone should be taking this into consideration when you're planning development. Planning board, zoning board, and board of selectmen, when you're looking at, okay, what can we do in town? Everything impacts your infrastructure. And this is the key to how we can grow by improving our infrastructure. So with that, if you want to, I'll open let me see, I've only very few people running at 14 tonight. So what I will do is, if people got a question, what I would like you to do is ask the chair, state your name, address, and any particular slides you want to look at. The floor is now open to the public. Sherry, I'll tell you what, to the board. Dan, do you have any questions or?
No, I already looked at it once.
Okay, Sherry?
Nope, that was very informative. Again, it is a 20-year plan, but things should start moving.
Okay, public, it's all yours.
Could you take down the thank you from Wright Pierce?
I don't know, but I'm pretty well appreciative of Mary. I mean, that's,
Okay. For some reason, the slides are still up there. I have a question. Who from Union Point was there at your meeting?
okay, I will answer that. Tom Henderson was there. And again, the way we formatted this was basically just as we did tonight. We focused strictly on the phase 2 in those 7 areas, and went right around the room and just asked, what do you see as the constraints, pros or cons? One of the things that Kevin did mention, excuse me.
No, Tom.
I'm thinking of Tom did mention, I'm dating myself. What Tom did mention is the concern for PFAS in that area. And the fact that the development is still in its development stage with the new owners, Brookfield. So I think anything being done with the base, he just more or less, and Kevin, you could jump in if I'm wrong, indicated that it's a long way off of any kind of decisions.
Yeah.
Did he happen to tell you that you can't do it there because any sewerage goes to whatever is built there, and that's in the legislation? There's
No,
legislation governing the base and governing water and sewer. I was on the state committee for this, for the MEPA process for 6 years.
Adam, I don't believe he did mention that.
Because he knows nothing about it.
Okay, what we could do is I could send an email to Tom if you want, to see if he could forward any of that information to you, Kevin.
Yeah, no, that would be helpful, and that would be really good to know. Again, we're
You need to get a hold of Jim Young at the base. That would have all the information for you.
Who would?
Jim Young.
Jim Young?
Yep.
All right, I'll email, to go through the chain, I'll email Tom to ask Jim Young for the information on the sewage or the base.
No, thank
And
you.
it would involve the Navy because they're still in charge of any contamination in PFAS, groundwater, and yes, the way of doing sewer over there has been looked at by others. So yes, individual areas, so on and so forth. The developer is on the hook for paying for water and sewer. They're supposed to procure it and finance it.
Yeah, but again, selfishly looking at from Rockland, I know that was done then, but I'm one that still would like to beat and talk to them because one of the keys to Rockland's development is going to be somehow, some way, breaking off north of northern Rockland, being the use the Hingham Street area, because that would alleviate a lot of the pressure on this wastewater treatment system. If it can't be done, it can't be done. But I'd like to go down fighting, at least talking to them.
Well, you won't be able to, in terms of the legislation, the developer has to pay for water and sewer. Okay, they may want to do upgrade your plant to include them. That's always a
The problem
possibility.
upgrading the plant, Mary, the problem with upgrading the plant itself is I'm maxed out at the discharge at 2.5 million.
Right, but the thing is they may be able to do a new plant. It depends on what it's going to be cheaper for them.
Oh, no, I agree. That's why I want to keep the dialogue, and I expressed that to Tom, that I want to keep the dialogue open. Just because it's closed now doesn't mean it wouldn't open in the future.
No, it's not that simple. The MEPA process is not that simple. It's not something that's going to just open up.
Well,
Agreed.
let me give time to learn it, or the next
Yeah.
person learn it, but.
And the other thing to keep in mind too is the regulators, EPA in particular.
That's right.
They're not going to allow any more than 2.5, which is the permitted flow to the French stream. So upgrading the existing plant, yeah, we could probably upgrade that to be able to handle more flow, but you're limited on the discharge to the French stream, hence looking for other groundwater discharge areas. And as Adam said, even other surface water discharges, which will probably not pan out very well.
See,
But
that's a
Mary-
great point to make, Kevin, because a lot of people are thinking that this upgrade is going to give us more capacity. You're not going to gain capacity.
No, but you're also not going to be able to use the base because the regulators are already involved with that issue.
Well, that's what I'm hearing.
And
from
they're
you
very
guys.
clear on sewer treatment plant. There was only one place that it could be put in. It was a pilot program, and there's no mistake allowed.
Mary, like I said, these were all hypotheticals. Nothing's etched in stone. These are just evaluation of areas around town that we have to look at. Would be not doing our due diligence if we didn't. And like I said, this study is something that should have been done when the money was originally allocated in 2006. We could have had some of these all worked out, but right now, with this EPA order, we are under the gun.
This is good feedback though from Mary and Chuck. I think we need to do just a little more vetting out, whether it's connecting, as Mary said, with Jim Young or Mr. Henderson again. If there are some, quote, showstoppers with Union Point, that would be really nice to know now. And again, we don't want to waste time still considering Union Point if there really is a deal breaker right now. Adam already noted too.
Well, I would say there's a deal breaker now, and if it's a matter of throwing more money, I would back burn Union Point.
Sure.
So as far as
Okay.
if anything on this CWMP, and this is going back to the big one, that the biggest goal and the biggest bang we can get for our buck is going after that I&I, that inflow and infiltration. And this is just another way to reduce that by taking the pressure off the existing system.
Yep. Yeah, and again, we still have, if you set Union Point aside and maybe set McCarthy Farm aside, we still do have a couple of other potential groundwater discharges that we can vet out. So the flow shedding that Adam talked about, could still very well be in play. We'll have to kind of work through and see what sites could be feasible and what we could potentially, pull out of the collection system and put in the groundwater there, which would, in addition to the reduction in the II, hopefully help you bring those flows down to your plant. And then, maybe in a perfect world, you could lift that moratorium and allow a little bit more growth. But yeah, getting a permitted flow higher than 2.5 and discharging to the French stream is not going to happen.
And the other thing to keep in mind as well, people, is that we have an estimate of a facility upgrade, and we're developing a plan to move forward. But as you saw, and as Adam and Kevin indicated, that equipment is extremely old. If one of those, for example, the aerators went down that Kevin mentioned and Adam mentioned, those tanks, that's a hefty chunk of change right there. You're talking, you know, in the millions.
Yeah. Yeah, and I see that Rick Katuch is on from Veolia. You know, he's the chief over there, and you know, kudos to Rick and his crew for doing the job that they're doing over there with the high flows and with some aging equipment. They're doing a really good job with what they have. So, but there are some things that need to be improved.
We have a question
Yeah.
from Teresa.
Yes, I have a question. Thank you so much for the presentation. I agree that the engineer is doing a wonderful job. It was very informative. I liked it because it was, I've heard a lot of these types of presentations, but this one was very down to earth. And it spoke at a level that was very understandable, and I appreciate that very much. I had a question though, with regard to the groundwater discharge areas that are on private property. I don't understand how that works. Would we be, as a town, taken an easement by eminent domain to use the property for discharge? Or would we have to rely on, say, the golf courses giving us a grant of an easement? How does the mechanism work exactly with private property?
I can start. It can take on a few different forms, Teresa. It could be, usually we look to see where there's town-owned property first for obvious cost reasons, but if you have to look at private, we've seen some communities purchase a set amount of land from a private entity. Doesn't always happen, but you know, if the price is right, you might be able to purchase property or get an easement, you know, not purchase it, but get an easement for that groundwater discharge. So, you know, that would be part of the recommendations, you know, for the short list of sites. You know, if there are a couple of private ones there, you know, we would have to include that in the overall, you know, cost and non-cost factors. So that can be a real challenge, but we always start with what does the town own first, because that makes it a lot easier just from a legal standpoint.
Yeah, I have 10,000 square feet if you'd like to use it.
What's your price?
Short money.
We're not going to be able to do much flow shedding with that amount of land, but thank you for offering.
Kevin, I have a question for you. And I'll ask you as a resident. When you're looking at alternative options, one of the notes I had taken as we're going through this, say we have a large commercial developer that's willing to come into town that owns a large parcel of land. But the sewer commission is part of that permit, condition that permit to connect based on they allow one of these alternatives, be it a wick, be it a one of those sand pits that Adam showed me the other day, or you know where I'm getting at. Would it be beneficial to us to say, hey, would you be willing to put one of these on your property?
You certainly could.
Or would it depend on the size of the property?
It would depend on the size of the property. Yeah, you would have to have room to be able to put some sort of little package plant, I guess we'll say, and be able to have enough area to have a groundwater discharge, whatever type system it is. But certainly, you know, if somebody comes in, you know, a developer with a commercial property and there's the property is big enough, it could be worth having that discussion. Hey, let's make a deal.
Okay, let's just throw that open a little further. While you're in the process of investigating additional options, what options are there for, not to say tight parcels of land, but a reasonable parcel of land, say a builder wants to put on a multi-unit apartment building? Are there options that we could put on that little site to reduce their flow? Would there be the possibility to put underground storage on their sites to discharge their flow in a controlled manner?
Yeah, that's a really good point. We actually work with a number of communities, obviously, including Rockland, we actually just did for a central Mass town. There was a couple of developers that came in, and this town was largely fully sewered, similar to Rockland. And one of the things, couple of the requirements for them to be able to connect, they're both going to be allowed to connect. But where they were connecting, there was some concern about the existing pipe that they were going to discharge to and maybe surcharging it under certain flow conditions. So one of the requirements in approving it was for them to put in, as Adam mentioned earlier, flow equalization tanks. So provide a a big wide spot, if you will, or a large tank that you can hold that flow and taper it in, bleed it into the collection system. Don't just pump it all in real quick. So equalize that flow. So that's certainly a strategy that could be used going forward.
If you could think of any papers or literature that further describes those alternatives, if you could send them to me to bone up on, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, I can do that. We actually did a job in Westminster, not that that matters, and were having some issues under certain high flows where they had a pump station that they could not increase the flow. And we actually took the 18-inch diameter pipe right up gradient of that for 1,000 feet and put in a 4 by 8 foot box culvert as an equalization tank. So again, it would hold that flow under high flow scenarios and allow the pump station to catch up. So there are some strategies, a number of different ways, whether it's inline or offline. And I can share some of that information with you, Chuck.
Yeah, if you would, and to the other board members, that's what I was getting at when we approach these things for permits and that. We got to start thinking outside the box, because we really cannot stop development or the town will go broke. But we
Right.
got to start thinking of alternatives to these problems that, no idea is too far-fetched. We got to start thinking really outside the box.
Yeah.
So Kevin, if you could send me more literature on that, I'd appreciate it.
No, I will. And Adam touched on that as part of, his slides too, that we're gonna look, EPA's required you guys, with your order to take a look at inline and offline storage, putting in some tanks, allowing some surcharge in pipes. So that's part of what we're doing now.
Do I have the room at the facility as it exists now, on the footprint that exists, to put a large holding tank in there,
Probably,
in your opinion?
probably a better question for Rick Katuch. I don't know, Rick, if you want to chime in on that. There is some space, Adam. I don't know. No, we don't have the presentation up. There is some area available there, but not a lot. In one of the grassy areas over by the secondary clarifiers is already kind of dibbed, if you will, for the tertiary phosphorus removal system. So there's a little bit of area and some extra tankage that could be used, and we're going to look at that as well.
When we get off of this, and maybe tomorrow, it's going to be worth a phone call of another area that I was possibly thinking of potentially not discharge, but helping us out. But I'll get into that later. I don't want to discuss that in this forum.
Well, that's Teresa's property, right?
Pardon me?
That's Teresa's property, I think, right?
No, I already sent Teresa an email that I want to buy that for myself, but go ahead.
Sorry, Teresa.
Do anybody else have any questions?
Mr.
I don't
Chairman,
have a question, but I may have some information you might want.
You just cut yourself off, Mary. Hello?
Oh,
There she says, Mary.
wrong thing.
Okay.
Yeah, because I was at a MWRA meeting in December and they actually stated that they don't have any more capacity for the South Shore for MWRA sewer.
I remember that.
Just to let you know that out there too, so that you don't hear someone saying, oh, well, you can join the MWRA sewer when you can't.
Yeah,
Kevin, I have that report. I could forward it to you. I think I did.
Yeah, you
Didn't I?
did. You did. And yeah, the MWRA has actually opened up recently and are much more amenable to water connections, but sewer connections, significant sewer connections to the MWRA is still very challenging at best. So connecting into the MWRA for you guys really isn't a feasible option, unfortunately.
Well, one of the alternative options I had asked you to look at before was the possibility of Brockton.
Yeah, Brockton also, Adam, I don't know if you can speak to that, but I don't think you'd have to go through Abington, right, to get to Brockton.
Yeah.
I just don't think they have the capacity either right now.
Well, I think the EPA just granted them additional capacity to take on some more flow from Abington.
Right, for Abington.
Hey, I'm reaching.
No, then that's fine. You know, I'm not trying to be abrupt here either, but that's something that we actually, Veolia does run, I believe, Veolia does run the Brockton plant. So that is probably something, Adam, that we may want to just quickly look into as well. But I do think that, you know, based on some early vetting, unless something significant has changed, I don't think that's a feasible option for Rockland.
Well, how about getting Rick a tanker truck that he could take to and from work and drop it in Brockton surreptitiously?
I'm sure he would love that.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yes.
This is John
Please
Ward.
have your name and address, though.
Sure. John Ward, 22 Nevins Circle. There is, and I'm not sure if it's still available, but the landfill site in Rockland, in back of the major dump site, there used to be sand pits back there. I don't know if you can utilize any of that.
Well, it's funny you say that, Jack, because we brought that up. I brought that up Mr. Lapp chimed in that evidently either the EPA or Mass DEP has reached out to the town of Rockland about lining and capping that area. It's currently not lined or capped.
No, this was an area that was not part of the landfill. That was, I don't know why they would line it and cap it, but
Yeah.
just a thought if somebody could check it out.
Adam, would it be helpful to pull up one of the maps again, just so we can maybe point to what Mr. Ward is talking about on the map?
Yeah, give me a second.
Jack, are you talking the area off of Pleasant Street in VFW?
No, I'm talking the Beach Hill landfill on the.
My error. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's, yeah, you're referring to the old landfill on VFW and Pleasant. I'm referring to the major landfill at the south side of town, to the east of the landfill. There's an area, I'm talking about the main landfill hill. There's an area back there that's.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. That's where the DPW has some vehicles and
I don't know what's there now, but there were sand
the
pits.
solar area.
There used to be, the police department used to use it for a shooting range.
They still do, yes.
So I don't know if it might be too small, it may not fit your needs, but the town already owns it.
We did talk about that during Tuesday's meeting at looking at this area down here closer. So thank you for that.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody else have any questions or? I guess silence is golden. Kevin, Adam, again, my thanks to you and very professional and well done presentation. Like I said, you make things very easy to understand.
Thank you for having us, and good to see everybody. Some good questions and comments. Again, we still looking to take in information. You guys know your town pretty darn good, so we appreciate that, and we will be seeing you again.
Yep.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, again, Adam, Kevin, I'll wait till this release any slides until you give me the green light.
Yep, we'll follow up on that.
Okay. With that, I'm going to ask any of the residents that are on if they have any other questions regarding today's notice that went out on the overflow. Okay, with that, I'll take a motion to end tonight's meeting.
I'll make the motion.
Do we have a second?
I will second that motion. Thank you, gentlemen.
All in favor, Mr. DeRoss,
Yes.
Ms. Valley,
Yes,
and Mr. Hessian is a no. I'm having too much fun. Yes is a yes. Thank you again, ladies and gentlemen. That's all for tonight.
Take care.
Thank you
all.
for your questions. See you later.
thank you.
I'm gonna shut it off now. How? I don't know. Oh, there, wait, there.